Hello, friend. Where are you listening tonight? A rocking chair on the porch? A small, dark room with rain pattering on the windows? Maybe you're in need of something to fall asleep to. Headphones in, looking for something that feels like home. Well, you've found it. Tonight I have a story for you. The sound of a wood stove and rain is relaxing. Not loud, not fancy, but it can stay with you longer than most. A story about a man riding through a snowstorm, a baby crying in his arms, and a woman opening the door not knowing she's about to become someone's mother. A story about loss and love, and the kind of kindness that makes the cold a little less cruel. If you like stories close to your heart, go ahead. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I'll be right here telling you stories as long as you have me. Now, wherever you are, get comfortable. Because this story is yours. The wind cut like razors through wool and leather. It howled over the whitewashed plains, stirring up curtains of snow that swallowed the land whole. Underneath the gray sky, a lone rider moved slowly, not from pride or leisure, but because his horse was just as tired as he was. John Wilkes hadn't slept in 2 nights. He clutched the child tighter to his chest. Ellie, wrapped in the only 2 blankets he had. Her face was red from crying, then pale from exhaustion. She hadn't fed since dawn yesterday, and no matter how many times he whispered promises into her frozen ears, her stomach remained empty. Milk. He needed milk. Nothing else mattered. The sun didn't rise that morning. It just became a paler shade of gray. John passed 3 homesteads since leaving his cabin. He'd knocked on each door, eyes hollow, breath fogging in the cold. The first family said their cow died last week. The second offered him broth, but said they couldn't spare more. The third slammed the door without a word. Maybe they thought he was going to steal. Maybe they were right to. Now, his horse, Dusty, limped more than walked. She had a gash on her right hind leg from slipping on frozen rock, but she kept moving, sensing her master's desperation. John couldn't feel his fingers anymore, just the weight of his daughter and the silence between her cries. "One more house," he muttered. "Just one more." A silhouette appeared ahead. A wooden house, smaller, more worn than the others. Faded paint, shingles missing from the roof. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Signs of life. John slid off the saddle, nearly falling as his knees buckled. He cradled Ellie, covered her face against the wind, and stumbled to the door. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. Then, footsteps. The door creaked open slightly, revealing the barrel of a rifle, and behind it, a woman's eyes. Sharp, steady, and tired. "We don't sell anything," she said flatly. John didn't move. "I'm not buying. My daughter. Please." The woman blinked. Her eyes drifted downward to the motionless bundle in his arms. A pause. Then slowly the barrel lowered. The door opened wider. "Come in, now, before she freezes." Inside was barely warmer, but the fire was alive. The scent of stale bread and pine smoke hung in the air. The woman took Ellie without a word, peeling back the blanket. Her face hardened. "She hasn't fed," she said. "How long?" "Almost a day," John croaked. She didn't ask more, just sat in the chair beside the fire, unfastened her coat, and began to nurse the baby like it was the most natural thing in the world. John stood, motionless, like a man watching a miracle. You have milk?" "I lost mine last month." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Ellie suckled weakly at first, then hungrily. Her tiny hand latched onto the woman's shawl. A sigh escaped her lips. The first peaceful sound in hours. John sank to the floor, overwhelmed. "What's your name?" "Clara," she said softly, stroking Ellie's hair. "And yours?" "John." "John, take off your coat. You look half dead." He obeyed. The fire crackled, and in that small wooden room, battered by wind and grief, a stranger held his daughter to her chest, warming the girl with her body, feeding her from the emptiness of her own loss, not out of duty, not out of charity, but out of something older, something deeper, something like love. The storm had settled into a steady hum, like a beast pacing outside the windows. Inside the wooden house there were no clocks, no ticking, no noise, just the pop of firewood and the occasional whimper from baby Ellie, now asleep in Clara's arms. John sat across from her, silent, his hat held in both hands like a man at church. Clara leaned back in her chair, still cradling the child against her chest. She didn't rock, didn't hum, just sat, watching the snow swirl past the small window, watching a man she'd never seen before stare at the floor like he'd forgotten how to speak. "You look worse than your horse," she said after a while. John blinked. "She's all I got left. Wasn't gonna leave her behind." Clara gave a faint smile, not amusement but recognition. "You're from across the ridge?" "Near Red Mesa." "That's 2 days' ride, easy." "Was 3 in this weather." She looked at him, eyes narrowing. "You could have lost the baby." John's face cracked, a flash of guilt, rage, and helplessness all in one. "I know," he said. "But what else was I supposed to do? She was wasting away." The words hung in the air like smoke. Clara shifted Ellie gently, pulling the child closer. Her fingers were calloused, but her touch was impossibly tender. "I didn't think I'd ever hear that sound again," she whispered, eyes on Ellie's breathing. "What sound?" "A baby's breath, right here, by my heart." John lowered his gaze. There was pain behind her voice, the kind that wasn't meant to be shared, but somehow leaked out anyway. "Yours?" he asked quietly. She nodded, once. 3 weeks. Born still. Would have been my first. There was no ceremony in her words, just weight, heavy and dry like cracked earth. Silence returned. Not awkward, just raw. Clara stood and laid Ellie in a woven cradle by the hearth, lined with sheepskin. John rose slightly, unsure, but she raised a hand. "She's warm now. She'll sleep." Then she turned, went to the small kitchen corner, and ladled hot stew into a wooden bowl. "You eaten?" "Didn't think about it." "Well, start thinking, or you'll drop dead before sunrise." She handed him the bowl. He took it with both hands. It was just broth, weak, thin, mostly water and turnip, but it was the first warm thing John had tasted in days. He swallowed with a grateful groan. "Thank you," he said, "for all of this." "Don't thank me yet," Clara replied. "Storm's just started." That night, they didn't sleep much. Ellie whimpered once in her dreams, and both adults stirred instinctively. Clara rose first, wrapped the baby tighter. John sat by the fire, legs stretched out, boots steaming from melted snow. "How long since you lost your wife?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her, not startled, but as if someone had pressed on a half-healed wound. 7 months. Fever took her. She held on long enough to name the baby. then just let go. Clara nodded, eyes glassy. Mine never opened her eyes. They didn't cry. In the West, grief didn't come with tears. It came with the way your voice broke mid-sentence, or how your hands shook when no one was looking. As dawn bled into the snowy sky, the house smelled of smoke and milk and wood. John stood by the window, staring at the white wasteland outside. "I should go," he muttered. "Don't want to impose." Clara didn't answer, just walked over, picked up Ellie, and placed the baby gently into his arms. "She'll need more feeding before the day's done, and I'm the only woman within 10 miles with anything left to give." John looked down at Ellie, then back at Clara. "Then I reckon we'll stay, for a while." Clara stepped back, her expression unreadable. "Just until the storm passes," she said. But even then, both of them knew. The worst storms didn't come from the sky. They came from inside. By the third day, the storm no longer roared. It whispered. But the snow had piled high against the door, and outside, everything looked drowned in white. Time passed slowly in that house on Hollow Creek, measured not in minutes, but in movements. A log placed on the fire, a breath caught in a baby's sleep, a sideways glance across the room. John now knew where Clara kept the kindling, where she set the tin mugs to dry, that she stirred soup clockwise, never counter. And Clara noticed how he folded his blanket before lying down, that he hummed almost silently when holding Ellie, that his boots were always pointed toward the door, even when he slept, as if he was always ready to leave. Clara didn't speak much, and John didn't ask why, but every night he'd catch her staring at the empty crib across the room, the one she never moved, never repurposed, never dared to dismantle. It sat like a ghost. And Ellie, sleeping peacefully in Clara's arms, felt like a borrowed presence, a memory remade, if only for a moment. That morning, Clara was standing by the window, her hair braided and pinned, holding Ellie like it was second nature. John sat by the fire, wrapping a strip of cloth around a broken stirrup strap, hands slow but methodical. "You're planning to ride out?" she asked. John looked up, caught off guard. "Storm's easing. I reckon I should go. Can't stay in your home like some beggar." Clara didn't flinch. "You're not a beggar. You're a father." John set the leather down, looked at her fully for the first time that day. "You've done enough, Clara. You gave her life again. I won't take more than I have." She didn't answer, just stared at Ellie. The child cooed and nuzzled her shoulder. "You know," Clara said, voice low, "you don't have to take everything alone. It's not about pride." "Then what?" John stood, suddenly restless. "People leave. They die. Or worse, they stay and still leave. I swore I'd raise her on my own. I owe her that." Clara turned. Her eyes held no judgment, just understanding. "I'm not offering to raise her for you, John. I'm offering to help." The fire crackled. Wind tugged at the window panes. John walked to the cradle and placed a hand on Ellie's belly, feeling it rise and fall. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, softer now. "Because if someone had knocked on my door 3 weeks ago and offered what I'm offering you, I would have said yes." Silence again, but different now, heavy with possibility. That night, Clara made cornbread, dry but sweet. John washed the dishes. They didn't speak much, but the air between them warmed. Before bed, Clara handed Ellie to John. He took the child gently and held her against his chest. "You smell like biscuits," he muttered to the baby. From across the room, Clara smiled, small, real, and the first one that reached her eyes. "Better than smelling like horse," she replied. When they turned in for the night, John paused at the threshold of the spare room. "Clara," he said quietly. She looked up from the fire. "If we stay another day, would that be all right?" "Of course," she said, barely above a whisper. "As long as you need." But neither of them knew that need would last longer than either expected. Clara stirred the stew slowly, her hand moving in circles as snowflakes slid down the window like falling ash. Outside, the sky was a blanket of pewter, pressed low on the earth. The storm hadn't ended. It had merely grown quieter, as if conserving its breath for something worse. John was outside, chopping wood behind the barn. She could hear the thud of the axe, the rhythm broken, uneven. He was still favoring his left leg from the ride. She noticed it even if he never mentioned it. She ladled the stew into bowls and left one on the table near the fire. "If you're trying to impress me with your chopping," she called through the cracked door, "you're doing a terrible job." A pause. Then from the other side, "I was trying to impress the horse." She smirked. Not a full laugh, but more than she'd had in weeks. By the time John came in, his hair dusted with snow, Ellie was already awake and cooing in her cradle. He knelt beside her, wiped his hands clean, and offered a finger. She grabbed it immediately. "She's strong," Clara said from the table. "She gets it from her mother." His voice wavered at the word. Clara felt it in her chest, the heaviness of a name not spoken, the ache of memory still warm. "What was her name?" she asked gently. "Sarah. Tell me about her." John looked at her, eyes unsure. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. He sat down across from Clara and wrapped his hands around the bowl. Steam rose between them like mist. "She was short, had this way of walking like she was always late to something. Hair dark like rain-soaked bark, laughed too loud, cried when she cooked onions, drove me mad. Sounds like love." It was. He paused, spoon hovering. "She wanted 5 kids, built a rocking chair with her own hands, buried it behind our house when Ellie was born, said it wasn't worth sitting in alone." Clara's throat closed up. She blinked, hard. "And you?" "I wanted her. That was enough." They ate in silence for a while, not the heavy kind, but the sort that wrapped around you like a soft quilt. Afterward, John went to check the firewood stack outside. Clara stayed by Ellie, brushing the child's hair with the edge of her sleeve. "You don't know," she whispered to the baby, "how much you've saved us both." She didn't mean to cry, but when she leaned back, her cheek was wet. That evening, Clara found John standing outside with a lantern, staring into the dark. "Coyotes?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking." "Dangerous habit." "Yeah, well, I've got more time for it now." She stepped closer. "You're not the only one who lost something, John." He looked at her. "I lost more than a child. I lost a part of me. The part that knew how to want anything else." Clara's voice cracked. "But I'm starting to remember. Because of you and because of her." They stood in silence. Then gently, she took the lantern from his hand and held it between them. "Come inside. The fire's still warm." And this time, when he followed her in, he didn't leave his coat by the door. He hung it up, like a man deciding to stay. The sun never quite rose that morning. It lingered on the horizon like a promise unkept. The snow had crusted into a hard shell overnight, glistening and deceptive. You could walk on it, but only until it swallowed you whole. John had woken early. Clara found him outside, near the horse shed, half covered in frost, patching up a broken harness with numb fingers. "You should have waited," she said, bringing out a scarf and wrapping it around his neck from behind. "Storm's easing. We're running low on flour. Thought I could make it to Mr. Delaney's post. That's 15 miles out. And your horse is half starved. So am I." Clara didn't laugh. "We'll ration better. We already are." John led Dusty, his mare, down the slope behind the barn. The path was narrow, slick with ice hidden under the powder. Clara offered to help, and he refused. Stubborn, prideful, predictable. Halfway down, the horse's hoof struck a patch of black ice. She stumbled, reared, and John's boot slipped. Clara heard the crack from the house. She dropped everything. She found him face down in the snow, moaning through clenched teeth. "Don't move," she said, kneeling beside him. Wasn't planning to. His leg was twisted wrong, the knee swollen, skin already bruising purple. Dusty stood nearby, whinnying nervously. "Broken?" "Feels like it." "Damn it, John." "I'm sorry." She hated how soft his voice sounded, like he was apologizing for being human. It took nearly an hour to get him back inside. Clara fashioned a sled from the barn door, tied it to Dusty, and hauled him through the snow herself. By the time she got him in front of the fire, she was soaked in sweat and ice. "Take off your coat," he mumbled, teeth chattering. "Don't you tell me what to do!" She wrapped him in blankets, boiled water, and cleaned the wound. She tore up one of her petticoats to bind his leg, then propped it up on a sack of oats. John drifted in and out of sleep, wincing with every movement. Ellie cried, loud, low, long, hungry. Clara picked her up, rocking harder than usual. "It's okay, sweet girl. He'll be fine. I've got you both." The words came out like a vow. That night, Clara barely sat down. She checked on the fire, checked John's fever, checked Ellie's breathing. She hadn't worked this hard since burying her child. And for the first time since then, she didn't feel like a ghost. At one point, John stirred. "Clara." She leaned closer. "Yeah?" You don't have to do all this." "Yes, I do." "Why?" She looked at him, at his face, flushed with pain, eyes clouded but honest. "Because when you love something broken, you don't leave it alone in the snow." He fell back asleep. She sat by the hearth, cradling Ellie, her free hand resting on John's. 3 of them now, bound by fire, by blizzard, by something deeper than either had planned for. The storm didn't roar, it screamed. By midnight, the wind had reached a fever pitch, battering the roof with fists of ice and snow. Each gust felt like a warning, each creak in the wooden beams like a countdown. John lay fevered and nearly unconscious beside the hearth, his leg wrapped and elevated, sweat beading on his forehead. Clara had done all she could. Ellie slept, bundled tightly in blankets and tucked against Clara's chest, her tiny hand twitching with every distant thunderclap. Then it happened. A terrible crack. Not thunder, but timber, echoed from above. The roof split above the bedroom, snow pouring in like sand from a broken hourglass. The fire sputtered from the Clara didn't scream. She moved, She dragged John out from under the sagging ceiling beam, gritting her teeth as splinters scratched her arms. She wrapped Ellie tighter, placing her in a laundry basket by the stove, insulated with wool and straw. Then she stared at the door. I need to get help. But who? Where? The closest homestead was Elias Delaney's, nearly 6 miles east. Across wind-beaten hills and half-frozen rivers, the trail wasn't even visible now. But staying here meant risking all of them. Clara looked back, at John, burning with fever. At Ellie, chest rising too fast. God help me. She strapped on her boots, tied down her coat, lit the lantern. Then she opened the door and stepped into the storm. Outside was white madness. The wind clawed at her hair, pulled her breath from her lungs. The lantern flickered violently in her hand. Snow curled around her legs like hungry wolves. But she moved, step by step, leaning forward, following muscle memory instead of trail marks. 1 mile, then 2, then 3. Her hands ached. Her ears rang. Her thoughts narrowed into just one. Keep moving. For them. At one point, the wind snatched the lantern from her hand. It rolled into the drifts, extinguished. Darkness. Clara screamed into the night, not in fear but rage. Rage at the cold, at fate, at whatever God let people die in places like this. They won't die, she muttered. I won't let them. She crawled now, frost crunching beneath her knees, until a light appeared in the distance, warm, golden, flickering behind a small window. Hope. She collapsed on Elias Delaney's porch. He opened the door, shotgun in hand, and froze. Clara May! Christ almighty, come in, what happened? She couldn't speak at first. She just gripped his collar and rasped. Man. Child. House collapsed, please. He didn't ask more. Just pulled on his coat, yelled for his sons, grabbed blankets and supplies. 2 hours later, help arrived at Hollow Creek. Elias and his boys carried John to their wagon. They reinforced the house roof as best they could. Clara, wrapped in blankets, sat beside Ellie the whole way back to Delaney's. The baby didn't cry. But when John stirred, weak, confused, the first thing he said was, "Where's Clara?" She leaned forward, brushed hair from his face. "Still here, cowboy. Still here." That night, John slept in a real bed, Ellie in a crib borrowed from Elias's grandkids, and Clara? She sat at the end of the hallway, her fingers still numb, her eyes locked on the oil lamp. It flickered in the dark, casting long, slow shadows. A beacon. A promise. That love, the real kind, walks into the storm, not away from it. 3 days passed since the storm. The snow had calmed, though the land remained blanketed in silence. At Elias Delaney's homestead, warmth returned slowly. One log at a time, one hot broth at a time. John was healing. Ellie was laughing again. And Clara received a letter. It came in a brown envelope, worn and damp at the edges, delivered by Elias's eldest son, who returned from town with a sack of cornmeal and a bottle of whiskey. "Postmaster says this one's been sitting for near a week," he said. "Looks official." Clara took the letter with both hands, recognized the handwriting immediately. From Cheyenne General Hospital to Clara May Whitmore. Subject: Field nursing opportunity. She didn't open it at first. She stood on the porch, feeling the cold seeping into her boots, heart pounding. John was inside, asleep. Ellie was playing with a wooden spoon on a wool blanket. The world was quiet, and Clara, suddenly, wasn't. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, the letter finally opened. The words blurred as she read. Your experience in field treatment and remote medical assistance makes you an ideal candidate. We are prepared to offer permanent lodging, salary, and future midwife training. It was everything she once prayed for. A fresh start, a purpose, a life away from ghosts. But now, she looked down the hall at Ellie's soft giggles and John's crutch resting by the door, and she wasn't so sure. Later that night, John stirred awake to find Clara by the window, the lantern casting a soft gold halo around her. You're pacing, he rasped. Sorry, she said, startled. Didn't mean to wake you. Hard not to notice when someone's fighting ghosts in the dark. Clara turned. The letter was in her hand. It's from Cheyenne. Hospital wants me. That's good. It is. A pause. But... She sat beside him. But I don't know if I want it anymore. John said nothing at first. Then he reached out, slow, careful, and placed his hand over hers. Why not? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because the life I thought I wanted feels small now, compared to this. This? He asked. You, Ellie. Firewood and snowstorms, and watching someone heal. With my hands. John's grip tightened. Not out of possession, but connection. I never wanted to need anyone again, he said. But when I saw you come through that door, covered in ice, carrying hope like it weighed nothing, he paused. I knew I wouldn't survive another winter without you. No kiss, no dramatic vow, just silence, and two hands, held tighter than they'd ever dared before. Clara folded the letter slowly, not torn, not discarded, just placed gently in the drawer beside the hearth, next to an empty envelope labeled, "For Sarah, never sent." In the West, there weren't churches on every corner, nor priests ready to bless a child's name. But there were bonfires, and neighbors, and tradition, and sometimes that was more than enough. Elias Delaney had called it the naming fire, a custom from his grandfather's time. You light a flame. You speak her name aloud for the first time as her people, the ones who'll raise her, love her, carry her into this damn world.
Clara hadn't asked for it. John hadn't known to hope for it. But that night, as the sky bloomed with stars over a snow-blanketed prairie, they all gathered outside. 3 families, 2 horses, 1 flickering fire. John stood first. He looked down at Ellie, bundled in Clara's arms, wide-eyed and sleepy.
I had a name ready, he said. Planned it with Sarah before she passed. He hesitated, but I think it's only right we speak it together. He turned to Clara. She smiled, not the shy one, not the broken one, but the one that says, I'm no longer alone. She nodded. Say it with me then. Together, under the stars and flame, they said, her name is Ellie Mae Wilkes. The fire cracked loud as if affirming the choice. Neighbors clapped. Elias nodded. And Clara, for the first time since burying her own daughter, allowed herself to laugh. Full, loud, without apology. John caught her hand. May? He asked. She needed a middle name. And she's already mine in some ways. He didn't let go of her hand. Not even when Ellie yawned and reached up for both of them. 3 fingers, 2 hearts, 1 fire. After the crowd had left and the embers cooled, Clara stayed behind to cover the coals. John lingered beside her. You ever think about forever? He asked. Out here, we think about next season, next blizzard, next time the roof leaks. Still, she turned toward him. Yes, she said. I do now. John leaned in, forehead resting against hers. Then I'd like to start thinking about it with you. And for once, Clara didn't say anything back. She just kissed him. Not like lovers in books or stories, but like people who had nothing left to lose and finally found something worth keeping. Spring crept into the plains slowly, not in flowers, but in the sound of water melting beneath the snow and the whinny of horses stretching under a warmer sun. Clara was planting beans near the cabin, Ellie giggling in the grass beside her, when a rider appeared on the hill. Dust on boots, leather mailbag over his shoulder. "You folks John Wilkes?" he called. John stepped out from the porch, wiping sawdust off his shirt. "I am." The man dismounted, dug through his satchel, and handed over a yellowed envelope. "Strange thing. Address said to forward if undeliverable. Looks like it's been riding in circles." John turned it over. From Sarah Wilkes to John Wilkes. Postmarked 8 months ago. His chest clenched. Clara noticed the shift. She stood quietly, one hand resting on Ellie's head. John sat alone inside. He didn't open it right away. He held it like he was holding something sacred or cursed. The paper was worn, ink slightly blurred. A few drops of water had bled into the bottom corner. Maybe Sarah had cried when writing it, or maybe he just imagined that. He broke the seal and read, "My John, if you're reading this, I've already gone. I hate that. I hate leaving you, and I need you to do something else. Let someone else in. You love like the plains, quiet, wide, and deep. Don't let it become barren. Raise her knowing that love doesn't end with death. Let someone help you. Let someone love you. And don't name her after me. She deserves her own name, her own light. All my love, Sarah." John didn't cry. He sat with the letter in his lap, head bowed, like a man in church after everyone else had left. When he finally stepped outside, the sun was setting. Clara looked up from the garden. She didn't ask, she just waited. He crossed the yard, sat beside her. "She knew," he said. "About what?" "That I'd try to do this alone. That I'd carry her memory like a stone around my neck." He pulled out the letter and handed it to Clara. She read it slowly, eyes softening, breath hitching only once. When she finished, she folded it carefully. "She gave you permission. She gave us a blessing." He turned to Ellie, who was now fast asleep in a wooden basket near the porch step. "She has Sarah's eyes," he whispered. "And your stubborn jaw," Clara smiled. John reached for Clara's hand. "I thought naming her meant letting go. But I see it now. It meant making room." That night, they lit a candle by the window. Not for light, not for ritual, but for memory. And across the prairie, the wind blew soft, not mourning, but carrying something forward. Summer was near. The snow had melted into the riverbeds, The grass returned in patches of stubborn green, and wildflowers bloomed like little rebellions across the prairie. The old road leading out of Hollow Creek shimmered in the heat, a path etched with wagon wheels and footprints of the past. John stood beside the fence post, hammer in hand, tightening the wire. Ellie was toddling nearby, barefoot and fearless, her sun hat flopping with each step. Clara leaned on the porch rail, arms crossed, watching both of them. In her apron pocket was another letter. The offer was from Cheyenne again, this time not a field posting, but a permanent midwife position, complete with salary, quarters in town, and a school for Ellie when she grew older. It was the kind of letter she used to pray for on lonely nights. And now, it sat unopened. She already knew what it said.